But the highlights this month include a
Uh,
discussion
I think
with Alice Wilson.
I
Can you hear
think there's
me?
an issue. That this issue is strictly my fault because of the new setup. I think everything was on mute. So this is not good. I apologize, everybody. Again, this is LWA season 3, episode 9. I'm joined here by Nadia, with Nadia Spaiti, who is going to become a co host with us. And MK is not able to be with us today, but she'll be rejoining. And we are now on our last episode of the past 3 years, the third season. We have a lot happening today, including the usual recommendations from Newton, as new text out now, as well as our must read selections. And we have interviews covering issues ranging from the 10th anniversary of the Gezi protests in Turkey to the BDS movement, to the BDS movement, to the Pro Economy Summer Institute, and many, many other discussions on podcasts and knowledge production and so on. And I'm very happy to be joined by Nadia, who is joining us from London.
Hi, everyone. So, as Bassam said, first we're going to go over what's new in our New Text Out Now or Newton series on Jadaliya. Newton highlights this past month, and it was really hard to pick just a few, include a discussion with Alice Wilson regarding her new book entitled Afterlives of Revolution, Everyday Counter Histories in Southern Oman, which presents a historical analysis of the Dhofar rebellion there and also examines its long-term consequences. In addition, there's a conversation with Nick Reimer about his book entitled Boycott Theory and the Struggle for Palestine, Universities, Intellectualism, and Liberation, which goes into detail about the reasoning behind BDS, as well as the pushback and resistance to it in the context of the neoliberal university. And I want to add lastly that Charlotte Karam Albrecht's book, Possible Histories Arab Americans and the Queer Ecology of Peddling, is a fascinating history of Syrian American peddling labor and its reverberations in American culture between the 1870s and the 1950s. So don't miss any of these. In addition, at Newton, there is a key interview with Nile Ozok Gundogan, a previous guest on the show, about her work, The Kurdish Nobility in the Ottoman Empire, Loyalty, Autonomy, and Privilege, which contextualizes the notion of hereditary nobility in the Ottoman Empire. So definitely check all these conversations and these books out.
Thank you very much. Now, I would like to bring in our first guest, who is an assistant professor in the Department of History at the University of Chicago, Aaron Jakes. Aaron has just been announced as the winner of the 2021 Pro Economy Book Prize for his book, Egypt's Occupation. Welcome, Aaron, and congratulations. Let's bring him in. How are
Hey,
you,
Aaron.
Aaron? You are muted. You are muted.
Is there a button right next to underneath the screen that says mute next to the share screen? I
Let's
think
try this. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. And
yes.
you know, I'm happy that this happened with you because we messed up earlier on. I messed up as well with the mute button. We were talking and nobody was hearing us. So I don't worry about it at all. Welcome again, Aaron. You are the winner of the the most recent 2021 book prize at the Pro Economy Summer Institute, and we are very happy you're with us.
I'm so
Aaron,
happy to be here. Hi Nadia. Hi Bassam.
hey, it's great to see you, Aaron, and congratulations on the prize. I know that the book has been out for just a bit, but you know, prizes are always welcome, and the reviews have been incredible. So, mabruk. Can we start by asking you to just tell us briefly kind of what the book is about and, you know, what motivated you to write it?
Sure. So it's most simply a history of the period of the British occupation of Egypt from roughly 1882, when the occupation began, until the end of World War One. And the book basically makes three arguments that are all interconnected, centered on the notion that the organizing premise of British rule for much of this period was an idea that Egyptians, as racially distinctive human subjects, were capable of no more and no less than a bare recognition of their own basic economic interests. So, this is the idea that I refer to in the book as colonial economism. And based on that argument, the book really explores sort of three dimensions of this British occupation. One, it argues that this idea about the kind of distinctive orientation of Egyptians toward economic interest informed the specific policies that this de facto colonial state implemented in Egypt. And connected to that is the idea, the second argument, that those policies helped to make Egypt into a major frontier for new forms of financial investment and experimentation at the end of the 19th century. And finally, the book argues that by reconsidering the history of capitalism in Egypt in this way, in a manner that is still attentive to the importance of cotton, that has been sort of the centerpiece of studies of Egypt until now, but it expands our attention to this world of new financial phenomena, financial boom, and this massive financial crisis that followed. That it becomes possible to understand the trajectories of anti-colonial thought in Egypt differently, and in particular to excavate both a very rich tradition of anti-colonial political economic thought and a related tradition of political thought that was concerned with making arguments about the relationship between politics and economics that were not economically determinist in the way that British colonial thought was in this period.
This is really incredible, and really congratulations again. What's next for you in terms of your research? Where has this been a platform for a future related project, or are you completely, turning a different corner?
Yeah, so the next big project that I'm working on is a very long history of the Suez Canal, basically from the end of the 18th century, before the first proposals for a modern canal through the Isthmus of Suez were mooted, into the present. And that project is obviously larger, longer, and somewhat different from this first book, but it builds on a lot of ideas and arguments that I was thinking through, both in Egypt's occupation and also in the work that I've been doing collaboratively with my colleague Ahmed Shukr since we were in graduate school at NYU, to kind of rethink together the history of capitalism in Egypt. And so the chapter that we wrote for the Political Economy Project edited volume, the Critical Political Economy of the Middle East and North Africa, I think for both of us became a way of trying to sort of sketch out some arguments about a longer trajectory of the history of capitalism. And there I'm particularly interested in exploring a history of the ways in which what look like state revenues in the region become transmuted into corporate profits in various ways over basically 2 centuries, and the role of the canal across multiple moments in the history of capitalism as a peculiar apparatus through which these kinds of transmutations happened.
That sounds amazing. I can't wait for this future project to come out as a book. I know it's going to take time, as you said. This is a much larger scope, but sounds amazing. Aaron, thank you so much for being with us.
And Aaron,
Thanks so much for having me.
before we let you go, Aaron, can you tell us a little bit about, very quickly, because we really don't have much time, about your chapter with Ahmed Shukr in the recent political economy, or the most recent political economy publication, which is a book by Stanford on critical political economy of the Middle East? Can you just give us a snippet of that?
Sure. So the chapter is called Capitalism in Egypt, Not Egyptian Capitalism, which encapsulates one of the arguments that we're making, which is that really anywhere in the world one is trying to understand the history of capitalism, it makes sense to think about the relevant geography as part of the research rather than one of its presuppositions. And so we're interested in sort of charting in that chapter, again, over about 200 years, a set of reconfigurations of the kind of relevant geographies within which Egypt was embedded across multiple transformations in the workings of global capitalism. Um, and yeah, and Ahmed's book, which should be out in the next year or two, is another kind of major contribution to that project. I had the opportunity to read a draft of the manuscript this spring, and it is absolutely spectacular.
Sounds great. Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate the extra.
Thanks, Aaron. We'd love to have you back anytime. And you're also, I just want to say, you're also on the Arab Studies Journal editorial team. So we thank you for all the work that you also have done for the Arab Studies Institute and for the Arab Studies Journal. Thank you so much.
Thank you both.
Take care.
Now I'd like to welcome Jadalia co-editor and regular contributor to LWA, Ma'in Rabbani.
Hey, Mu'in.
Hi guys, how are
Hi,
you?
Ma'in. Good. How are you? Nice to see
All
you.
right, good to see you. So I presume we're giving a roundup of connections during the past month.
We would love to hear from you, Mu'in, about all of the work that you've been doing at Connections. You have been so industrious that we cannot keep up with you. You have actually produced so far more than 60 podcasts on Connections. And when I say
I
60,
just had my 72nd.
you're 70. I'm always 12 behind. Last time I said 50 and you were at 63. So
Well,
and each of them is actually worth not just listening to, but a lot of this material I understand is also being assigned in classrooms because you're addressing really important and salient topics that educators are finding instructive to provide as reading, as listening, and watching material. So
well,
tell us a little bit about the
well,
variety that you have produced recently.
I'm delighted to hear that, and I've also gotten outstanding support from colleagues at Jadalia who are helping to not only produce these episodes but also bring them out in a timely manner. So in June, we had a total of 8 episodes. We had our first two discussions about Syria, the first of which was a wide ranging discussion with Jadiliya co editor Omar Dahi about the current state of affairs within Syria, looking at it also from the perspective of the growing normalization of relations with Syria by regional powers, and then delving also into the issue of sanctions and its impact on the Syrian people and essentially its non impact on those in power in Damascus. And then this week we had a second episode on Syria. This was with human rights activist Wa'il Tarabi, speaking to us from Majd al Shams in the occupied Syrian Golan Heights about the mass protests in that territory that have erupted in recent weeks over Israel's attempt to now seek to use environmental agendas and alternative energy as a pretext for further consolidating its hold on the Golan Heights, which it not only occupies but has illegally annexed. And Wa'il, I think, very expertly put this into broader historical perspective of Israeli policy towards the Syrians in the Golan Heights. And we concluded with what I thought was an interesting discussion about how others have been responding to this. And I asked him, those in the West who during the past decade have been speaking out very forcefully about the horrific human rights violations that have been taking place in Syria, particularly when they're perpetrated by the Syrian government. Have we heard anything about them in defense of Syrian human rights when the Syrians who are being abused are in the Golan Heights and the abuser is Israel? And he said that essentially haven't heard so much as a squeak in that respect. And then also pointed out that everyone involved in this, whether it's the Israelis, the Syrian government, regional powers, foreign powers, have tended to instrumentalize the issue of the Golan Heights to serve their own agendas rather than in defense of the Syrian people in the Golan Heights. Um, uh, Two issues that we have been following in recent months. The first is Sudan, and we had a further episode on the war in Sudan, this time with journalist Matt Nashed, in which he very expertly and I think exceptionally coherently laid out the current state of play, not only between the rival claimants to power, the Sudanese armed forces and the rapid support forces, but also essentially that there are two wars going on in Sudan, one between these two forces and another by them against Sudanese civil society in order to permanently block any transition to civilian rule in that country. And then the other issue to which we've in the past 2 years devoted quite a bit of attention and did so again this past month is Tunisia, where I had a discussion with the Tunisian academic and activist Huda Mzioudet about autocracy and xenophobia in Tunisia, looking at the policies being enunciated by Tunisia's president, Kais Saied, particularly his latching on to the Great Replacement theory and unleashing a torrent of racist abuse against African migrants in Tunisia, but also against Black Tunisians in the process. And we had a few others. I had a discussion with Olesia Vartanyan, an analyst with the International Crisis Group, about the South Caucasus, looking at the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and it centers on Nagorno Karabakh, and Azerbaijan trying to essentially compel Armenia to capitulate to its own agenda on the issues dividing them, and then also looking at it in the broader context of how the Ukraine war has had an impact in the South Caucasus. And in this respect, we also spoke a bit about how that Ukraine conflict is having an impact in Georgia, the country of Georgia, not the state of Georgia, which is also where Olesia Vartanyan is based. A particularly interesting episode, I thought, was a lengthy discussion I had with Bill Quant, who is not only a noted author and academic, but also served in the US National Security Council under both presidents Nixon and Carter. And I wanted to speak with him because the notorious war criminal Henry Kissinger recently turned 100 years old. And amidst all the discussion about his career, whether pro or con, it tended to focus very much, quite justifiably, of course, on his crimes in Southeast Asia, on his role within the United States. And I thought there was fairly little about the impact that he had on the Middle East and the legacy of his policies in the Middle East. So, people who are interested in that, I would very highly recommend that they visit the interview I did with Bill Quant on Henry Kissinger and the Middle East, in which we discussed not only the Arab-Israeli conflict, but also, for example, his role vis-a-vis Iraq and the Kurdish rebellion at the time. in Iraq. And like all episodes, they're available on both YouTube and Jadilia's homepage. And I'll finally, the two other episodes we did is with the noted Turkish and Turkey specialist, the journalist Amberin Zaman, looking at the outcome and impact and consequences and prospects of Turkey in the wake of um, uh, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's re-election there earlier this month during the second round, and looking at the growing autocracy within Turkey, how he was able to pull the rabbit out of the hat at a time when everyone was predicting that he may not make the finish line. And she explained how he managed to successfully ensure his reelection. And then finally, yesterday, I had a discussion with Professor Nathan Brown of George Washington University, who recently, together with three co authors, published a lengthy article in the flagship US foreign policy journal, Foreign Affairs, about the one state reality in Israel Palestine, and looking at the various implications and consequences of this reality. So we discussed the article, focused very much on the US foreign policy angle, the extent to which U.S. foreign policy helped through acts of omission and commission bring this reality about. What his prescriptions in this respect, and the extent to which he thinks they may come to pass. And we concluded with a discussion on the ongoing campaign by the American Jewish establishment and its leading organizations to suppress free speech on Palestine in the United States, using the well known and highly controversial, to say the least, definitions of anti Semitism promoted by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. So that's what we've been up to during the past month.
Thank you, Moeen. This is actually a wonderful lineup, and I myself, as I shared earlier, use your interviews and discussions in my classroom, and I
Well,
hope
that's
that
great to hear. Thank you.
absolutely, and we will, as you know, we have a plan this summer to curate so much of the knowledge production we have, whether it's in text, audio, or video, and to make it more readily available in a searchable manner for educators in the coming year. So that will be also on offer. Thanks so much, Maureen, for joining
That's
us.
great. Thank
And
you.
absolutely, Habibi. And we actually will be moving or staying with the topic of Palestine. You're welcome to stay, Mu'in, given that you are the natural co-host of this podcast, or of this live with ASI. I don't know what's it called. It's not a podcast. It's not a show. I don't have no idea what it is. But we feature our knowledge production over a period of a month. And now we'll stay with the topic of Palestine. And we'd like to highlight an article that was published in Jadaliya last month titled Nakba in the Age of a Catastrophe, written by the awesome Shireen Sayali. The article is part of a
Oh,
bouquet developed by the Palestine page editors in commemoration of the 75th anniversary of the Nakba, which, of course, Mu'in had a hand in putting together. Shireen is a professor of history at UC Santa Barbara, as well as co-editor of Jadaliya, and many, many other things. And she joined us now. Let me welcome her. Ahlan wa sahlan, Shireen.
Hi.
hello, Shireen.
Jane.
Hi, Maureen. Hi, Nadush. Hi, Bassam.
Hi.
Habibti. Hi. Oh, I miss everybody here. Hi, Jane. It's so good to see you, even though it's through a
To see you.
screen. Oh my God, ages. Thank you for being here with us. And we'd love for you to talk about, what this article is about and what gave you the impetus to write this piece for the Palestine Bouquet.
Well, first, I would have to thank Maureen, who is just relentlessly present and a pillar of the Palestine page and has really kept us together, even though we've been inundated with so many of our own work, but also generally the very difficult conditions on the ground in Palestine. And so in many ways, because Maureen was really pushing for a bouquet for the Nakba, I put together a shorter version of something that I've really been thinking through, which has been, on the one hand, to try and inventory the climate catastrophe that, especially in California, where I live, we often feel like we're at the front lines of. And essentially, what was the inspiration for the piece was to think about, how can Palestine, a place that we often understand as an object of sympathy or as a laboratory, quote unquote. This is how a lot of people write about it, and in many ways write about it and analyze it, because it's become a site for military technological experimentation. And what I tried to do in this piece, and what I'm trying to do generally, is really flip that script and say, actually, if you pay attention to Palestine, it might give you very concrete lessons for how to navigate catastrophe, especially now that we are all in this age of relentless catastrophe, of generalized catastrophe, of being in a temporality that is suspended. In California alone, since the beginning of the year, we've had 11 kind of catastrophic what's called river storms. And so I'm trying in this piece to put together an inventory of general climate catastrophe with an inventory of the escalation of settler governance and violence on the ground in Palestine, and to look to Palestinians to ask for lessons for surviving this kind of reality.
Thank you so much. And alongside your discussion of crisis or polycrisis, environmental and colonial, in the piece you also write that Palestine is a place of abundance. Can you speak more to that idea, which seems to be one of the ideas sort of underpinning the article as well?
Yeah, I guess for me, it is the incredible ways that Palestinians teach us about what it means to not just survive, but to also have and foster joy and kinship. And the image from the that you have on the screen right now is when children in Gaza broke the world record for kite flying. And I like to think about the way that we think about Gaza in kind of juxtaposition to this kite flying record, in the idea that actually it's important for people to remember that Palestinians have been able to foster families and kinship and joy and knowledge production and survival by holding ground, even though that ground itself is constantly shifting. And today is Eid, and you can actually see the images of Palestinians, celebrating the Eid literally under the surveillance of soldiers ready to shoot them. So I think it's that kind of incredible capacity to hold ground, to plan despite the future, and to nurture joy that really, I think, are the kinds of abundance and abundant lessons that Palestinians and Palestine teach us.
If I could just add, first of all, it's a fantastic piece, but I thought it fit particularly well into these contributions by each of Jadilia's Palestine editors, reflecting on 75 years of Nakba, because it brought in so many dimensions that one normally wouldn't associate with the Nakba in Palestine that Shireen has just enumerated. And I'd just like to remind viewers that Shireen's article, and indeed the entire Nakba bouquets is available on Jadalia's homepage.
Thanks, Maureen. And yeah, and to add to that, there's also two Newton bouquets that pertain
Yes,
to that
of
theme.
course. Yeah.
Uh, but Shireen, thank you. This is a beautiful and powerful piece, and thank you for being here to tell us more about it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks,
Bye.
Shireen. We
Thank
appreciate you guys so much, both of you, and actually, we hope you appreciate us because it's your contributions, both of you, notably Shireen from the 1990s to everything that we've been doing at ASI, have been monumental. And yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for making all these spaces possible.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care.
I see you. Bye, Maureen. Bye, Shireen.
Bye, you guys.
Bye.
Um, we actually have with us another. There we go. I think Nadia.
Hi. I'm not sure why I got disconnected.
I'll
Sorry
tell
about
you. I'll
that.
tell you exactly why you were disconnected because I was moving Shireen to the background and I moved you instead. Apologies.
No worries. So Bassam, you recently recorded an interview for the Flow podcast with French journalist Alain Gresh, who is the former editor-in-chief for Le Monde Diplomatique and is the current editor-in-chief of Orient 21, which he founded in 2013, so 10 years ago. I believe Alain is here with us now.
Yes, he is, and he's been waiting. So let's bring him in.
Hello,
Hello,
hello,
Hello,
hello,
Alain.
everybody.
welcome.
Welcome
Thank
to
you.
Live with ASI. Alain, you know, people keep wondering. They keep asking me that I always interview you. They think that we're related or something, and I just tell them no. When we want to learn about how Europe is viewing the Middle East or what's happening in Europe or in France in particular, Alain is the person to speak with. So we love to have you always, and thank you for joining and waiting in the background.
No problem.
Can you? We talked about so much during
Mm,
the conversation. It was live filmed.
mm,
Well, it
mm.
was filmed on location in your apartment on that famous table that I'm sure so many people have interviewed you on in your living room. Would
I'm
you?
still on the same table.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Because I think I saw something from 15 years ago on that table. Even though I think the first time I interviewed you was in 2006 for the film on the discourse on Arabs and terrorism. Alain, can you tell us, like, I know it's impossible to address a snippet of what we discussed or a summary, but can you share with us some of the discussions that took place on the question of, well, Europe and the Middle East, France and the Middle East, also the question of Palestine as it's developing in France?
Yes, as we discussed last time, the position of Europe and France on Palestine has moved in a very important way since 20 years. Sometimes people here don't understand. The official position of the French government is still the same. They are in favor of a two-state solution. They are regularly condemning the construction of settlements. They are condemning the violence against the Palestinians in the occupied territories. But in this sense, the French position has not changed. But what has changed in a very important way is the fact that this has no effect on the support of France to Israel on all economic, political, security field. Meaning, we are dealing with our relation with Israel as if the Palestinian didn't exist. And we are still repeating the same thing that Israel is a democracy, that we share many things, etc. I think there are many reasons for this change, but one of the important things is the fact that now a part of the political parties, not only the government, a part of the intellectual, sees what's happening on Palestine through the glasses of the war on terror. before it was clear, it was, in France at least, it was an occupation, an occupier should be find a compromise solution, etc., etc. Now it's not this. More is that the fact Europe and France are confronted with terrorism and with an Islamic threat. And this had changed the way we are speaking. I mean, the government and a part of the media are speaking about Palestine. And this explains why the solidarity, I mean, there is many attacks on the solidarity movement with Palestine, which is also in all European countries. We will publish in 10 days an inquiry we made about the attack on the Palestinian solidarity movement in Great Britain, in France, and in Germany. And this is very important. Now we have, I don't know if you heard, I mean, we have a Palestinian which was expelled from Jerusalem, who is a binational French Palestinian, Salah Hamouri. He's doing conference in all the part of the country. And now in each of these conferences, they are attacked by the pro-Zionist lobby, including physical attack. Despite the fact that the government has accepted him to come and have welcomed him, and despite the fact that he is a French citizen, he should be able to speak his mind in any. But this is creating a movement. And if a last remark is the fact that it's not the fact, for example, if you take the written press, I mean, Le Monde, Libération, even Le Figaro, they speak about what's happening in Palestine and in a very critical way to the Israeli policy. But it's not the main, it's not the main subject. You will have every day something about Ukraine, but when there is something about Palestine, there must be 10 people die to have something on the television and on the public debate. And also, I think one of the reasons is the fact that in some way now, the pressure of the pro-Israeli lobby is so strong that a part of the journalists who are not concerned very much, who work on television, radio, who know a little about Palestine and Israel, but don't know much, they are afraid of speaking. They are making self-censorship. It's not the fact that they are supporting Israel or something like this. I mean, we are not in the United States, but it's better not to speak about it because it's too complicated. You will be accused of being anti-Semitic, etc. That's it.
Thank you, Alain. And can you tell us a bit about the potential direction of, where things seem to be moving? Follow after this. What's your prediction, especially given kind of an upcoming election and all of this sort of where do you see the conversation moving, if it's going to shift at all?
In France and Europe, or
in France for now.
No, we don't have election. I mean, for many years, we will have the European election next year, but we don't have. We have a very difficult situation here. We have and this didn't happen in the history of the Fifth Republic since 1958. We have a president who has not a majority in the National Assembly, and this is creating a big crisis, a crisis of confidence, and. We have a very strong social movement against the law on retirement, to put the retirement from 62 to 64. But finally, the law was accepted, unfortunately. And you have a very, very negative and strange situation. I mean, people hate now. I mean, the hate against Emmanuel Macron is very big, but there is no political alternative. And unfortunately, the only political force which is growing now and gaining influence is the extreme right, I mean, of Marine Le Pen. Mm-hmm. And they have made a kind of internal revolution to appear as more moderate, as able to come to power, and she hopes to come to be the next president in, I think the election are in 4 years now. And so we are in a very difficult situation. There is also one thing which is just happened yesterday, which also tell us something about what the climate is about the question of the Muslim in France. Yesterday, a young French Muslim from a suburb has been killed by police, which is not, I mean, it don't happen, it doesn't happen every day, but it's not so, I mean, it's not so strange, unfortunately. The first reaction of the police was to say he tried to kill the policeman with his car, and they were ready to say it was his fault. Fortunately, there was a woman who has filmed what happened, and it's clear that they deliberately killed him. I mean, the policemen were not in danger. There was nothing, and it tells something about the climates concerning the Muslims, which are not considered as normal French citizens, and also something concerning the police. There are, I mean, really structural racism in the police, and nobody wants to confront the police. This is also, and there were yesterday many movements in the night in some suburb, people burn, I mean, young people burning things, etc., etc. But it says something about the way France is dealing with Islam, and this is very important. I mean, more or less every day in the French media, you have something about Islam. Islam is threatening our French model. They are threatening our society. There was a very strange incident. I mean, a boy of 12, not 12, 10 years old in a school has with two or three of his friends. One of them is not even Muslim. They say we will do 1 minute of silence for Prophet Muhammad, which has nothing. I mean, nobody, I mean, in the Muslim religion will do something like 1 minute of silence. He was arrested and he was considered, I mean, he was put to the police as a terrorist danger. And this tells a lot about the climate we have on this question of Islam. And as I said, and I finish with this is one of the problems with Palestine. It's not anymore considered only on the Israeli-Palestinian problem. It is also considered as a struggle against Islam, and Israel is fighting for the Western civilization and against the Islamic threat.
Thank you so much, Alain. And I really hope that you and I continue to have these conversations, whether on the table that you're sitting at right now or elsewhere. We will be in touch soon, and thank you for joining us again.
Thank you.
Here.
Bye, everybody.
Take care, my friend.
Are we shifting now, I think, to a discussion on Turkey,
Yes.
right? So specifically about the 10-year anniversary of the Gezi Park protests, which I can't believe it's been 10 years, but that's a different story. Last month, the Jadaliya Turkey page offered the first piece in a roundtable reflecting on the protests and their aftermath. And as part of the roundtable, guest editor Birgan Gökmenoglu has recently published an interview with Evren Savci titled Revisiting Gezi Through a Queer and Feminist Perspective. Birgan is a lecturer in sociology at Birmingham City University, and she joins us now. Welcome, Birgan.
Hi.
How are you?
Hi, Bergan. Thank you for waiting. Also, we're just running a few minutes behind because everything is so interesting. So apologies
Of
about
course.
that.
Of course, no problem. Thank you for having us here. We really appreciate it. Yeah. Do you have any questions, or should I just go?
Yeah, go ahead. We wanted to just ask you if you could give us a synopsis of what you published, and also how this particular interview is placed within the wider context of the roundtable.
Yes. So, in this in this roundtable that Daria Iskaya and I are co-editing at Jadaliya, we wanted to reach out to activists, collectivities, artists, scholars who have worked on or were involved in the Gezi protests and all the different forms of political engagement and grassroots protests or politics that we experimented with since then. Initially, our aim was to bring together as many perspectives as possible to reflect on Gezi critically, to learn from it, and to rethink our achievements and shortcomings with a view to opening up new perspectives, new alternatives. And today, especially after the last elections, where the institutional opposition or party politics were unable to offer truly transformative alternatives and instead got stuck in right-wing quick fixes, we believe a reckoning with Gezi is even more important and meaningful than before. We until now, we published 3 pieces. So the first one was by Cihan Tual. The second one is this interview with Evren Savcı. And we also published a piece in Turkish where a local collectivity talks about um, their struggles for the city and their ecological struggles. Now, we chose to interview Evren Savcı because she is one of the most prominent scholars who work on Turkey, and also because we had read her book, Queer in Translation, Sexual Politics Under Neoliberal Islam, where she examines sexual politics under Erdogan's AKP government. Today, we observe that an anti-LGBTQ stance has become a crucial part of the AKP's politics, that LGBTQ are now part of the expanding category of terrorists. And Evran's work and queer and feminist perspectives more broadly is important for any analysis of the current regime and of Gezi as well, of course. Because as Evren herself puts it in the interview, sexuality in particular has historically been used to define subjects and to govern populations. And we need the structural critiques of feminist queer thought about how sexual morality is used, about what it does, to understand not only sexual politics itself, but also how dispossession and inequalities are made to look ethical and just. So, in other words, we need these perspectives to better understand how inequalities are distributed unevenly across what Evran calls difference. So, how inequalities are racialized, gendered, classed, how inequalities are distributed unevenly across racial, gendered, classed, ethnic, religious lines. We also talked about some of the beauties of Gezi and the political situation today. I could share some of that conversation with you if there's time or interest. But I'd also like to mention that we have more than 10 contributions that will be published under this roundtable, a good few of which are from feminist and queer perspectives. So stay tuned on Jadiliya for more.
Thank you so much, Birgit. Why don't you take a couple of minutes and go into some of the details of that part of the interview that you were mentioning with Evron?
So I'll be paraphrasing again here, but Evren talked about Gezi as a clear resistance against the regime of material dispossession, privatization of public goods, and the environmental destruction that accompanies such politics, as well as a resistance against the racist, sexist, anti-queer, anti-trans morality politics of the current regime, which are all interrelated. And as such, Gezi was a big no to disposition and othering, and it was unique in this respect. Evren in the interview mentions that this politics of othering was disturbed at Gezi, especially in the narratives of old school secularism and nationalism, although I don't know how she thinks about this in light of the recent elections. But perhaps more importantly, she very insightfully argues that leftist politics must shift away from an exclusive focus on critique to incorporate that critique into the building of worlds and the building of alternatives. Unfortunately, since Gezi, we have been seeing an increase in militarized policing and the securitization of public spaces to the point where accessing them collectively has become extremely difficult. And these authoritarian practices, of course, are making it even more difficult to gather in public spaces for political purposes and to organize, of course. And to organize alternatives seems to be the real challenge we face in the foreseeable future. That would be my summary of some of the things that we celebrate today about Gezi and some of its legacies.
Thank you so much for that. And yeah, so to everyone who's listening, definitely check out the roundtable. And thanks to you and to all the other contributors for a really sort of timely and crucial intervention into this. And thank you for being here, Bergan.
Thank you so much.
Have a good day. Take care.
Bye, you too.
Bye. Staying with Turkey, we now want to introduce our next guest, Alp Keisarioglu, who has written a piece for Jadaliya called Weathering the Storm of Erdoganism. Alp conducts research and publishes on current and historical developments in Turkey. Welcome to the show, Alp, and thank you for joining us. And I'm sorry I accidentally butchered your name. Nice to
Thanks for the invitation, really.
Actually, Nadia, you've been doing.
I slid into it really smoothly, and then I had a hiccup in the middle of it. But
Actually,
yeah.
Nadia, you've been doing
All
so
good.
well because MK and I have always, chided and critiqued each other for like messing up names. So you're actually doing awesome. And welcome, Alp. If I may go with the first name, it's really straightforward. Welcome to Live with ASI.
Hi, thanks for the invitation.
Can you give us an
Yeah.
understanding of the politics of Erdoganism as you describe it, and tell us a bit about the piece that you wrote?
All right, yes. I mean, maybe the main question, or I guess what surprised most of the people, including me, obviously, is that Erdogan turned out victorious in the elections in May 14th, and then second round of presidential elections, May 28th. And not only in the presidential elections, but also in the parliamentary elections. We had them on the same time in Turkey. His main ruling alliance and the parties part of that ruling alliance also turned out to be victorious in the parliamentary elections. So, and I guess that, or I mean, I'm pretty sure. And when I read the international press, like everybody was quite surprised. And to be honest, I was also surprised about how comparatively clear the victory was. And so that begs an explanation, I guess. I think this is also not only of interest for, let's say, people like me, like kind of living in Turkey and researching on politics and economy in Turkey or of Turkey, but I guess also globally, because I would say, and that's I think one of the main points that I make right from the start of the article, is that what differentiates Erdogan's victory now is, I think we can safely argue that no other right-wing populist regime has been going through such deep crisis, like generally speaking. I mean, the pandemic, the inflation-induced cost of living crisis, the worst and most destructive earthquake just a couple of months before of the elections in the history of modern Turkey, and still stick to an electoral victory. And I think this is also interesting from a global comparative perspective on how durable or non-durable are institutionalized authoritarian populist regimes, and why are they, in the case now of Erdogan in Turkey, why are they so durable, and so everybody tries, like who's analytically engaged with Turkey and current developments in Turkey, is trying to give an explanation on this. And I mean, I've tried to give, let's say, certain elements or analytical blocks of analyzing how it worked out in Turkey for Erdogan in these elections.
And how do you see the political situation unfolding in Turkey over the next few months to a year, given what's just transpired and what's been transpiring?
Well, I mean, that's anybody's guess, I guess. I mean, like what you have, what was interesting, let me put it that way, when Erdogan got elected in the second round of the, I mean, he won the second round of the presidential elections on May 28th, he was actually employing quite a depolarizing discourse, like, pointing out nobody lost the elections, everybody won, the nation of Turkey won, 85 million people won, like the whole population of Turkey won these elections. Now it's time to put aside our problems that we had in the election time and come together again. So, I mean, it was basically, I mean, besides the issue of queer and LGBTQI identities, he was still lashing out against queer identities, even in these, one of the, let's say, most depolarizing and moderate speeches of Erdogan in the last years. He didn't stop from lashing out against queer identities. So but still, he took on a quite moderate tone, and he's been, I mean, for what we are used to of Erdogan, of course, right? He's going on in a quite moderate tone, and if you have a look at his ministers, and I mean, he's been changing some ministers, especially maybe what is important here is the interior minister, who was a very hawkish guy, Süleyman Soylu. He's put the old governor of Istanbul instead of him. We don't know yet so much about how hawkish he's going to be. Foreign minister, defense minister. He's been changing like very important ministries. And let's say he's been taking out the most hawkish ministers and putting in others where, let's say, the mainstream expectation is they are going to be more professional, less politicized, less polarized. Okay, so I mean, that's the mainstream interpretation of things. And of course, there's the Minister of Economy and the central bank governor. Maybe that's from the economy point of view important. He's been changing both, and taking a new minister and a new governor of the central bank, who are both more known for being orthodox. I mean, in that case, neoliberal orthodox in their idea of especially monetary policy and economic policies in general. So he's been signaling a return to neoliberal orthodox standards. But I mean, so this is Turkey and this is Erdogan. I mean, seriously, we've been seeing similar things, maybe not of this magnitude in politics, but in economic policy proper. We have been seeing similar things that he's been doing a couple of years ago, where he's just taking in the more orthodox neoliberal guys whenever he needs them, and then he throws them out again a couple of months later. He's been employing more moderate tone and more moderate politics, or at least discursive approaches, when he deemed it necessary a couple of years ago again, and then changed within a couple of months. So, I mean, I wouldn't expect anything. But as I said, so the mainstream expectation is that at least up until the communal elections, municipality elections that we're going to have next year, because I mean, we're going to have elections again very soon, right? I mean, it's in 8 to 9 months, I guess. It should be around end of March 2024. We're going to have local elections. So who's going to, and in that case, I think the important questions will be who's going to win the municipalities of the great cities, right? I mean, Istanbul, Ankara, Adana, Bursa, and so on. So it might be possible Erdogan will try to go for a more moderate. I mean, obviously, still the whole state and policy regime is authoritarian in its core, but maybe, you know, in the outer fringes or in its public appearance, it might be more moderate up until the local elections. But it also might not be. I mean, we are going to have important. I mean, I would have a look at important judicial decisions that are to come about. So there's a closure case against the main leftist pro-Kurdish party waiting at the Constitutional Court. The Constitutional Court hasn't decided yet, and I guess it's going to happen. I don't know whether within the next weeks, but most probably within this year, the Constitutional Court will be deciding whether it's going to close the party, HDP, People's Democratic Party. There's a court case against the mayor of Istanbul, who is from the Republican opposition, Ekrem İmamoğlu, where the prosecutor is demanding a political ban for him. So, I mean, I'd have a look really on the decisions the courts make on these points, and then you'll have an idea what Erdogan has in mind within the next months or year. So, I mean, that's the Erdogan perspective, okay?
Thank you very much, Alp. This is actually plenty, and we really appreciate your analysis of what to look forward to next. And we would love to have you again on Live with ASI. Thanks for joining us and being with us and sharing this, succinct and quite nuanced analysis of the elections and the post-elections developments. We will see you soon, I hope.
Sure, yeah, sure. Thanks for inviting me.
Please
Thank you.
join us again. Take care. All right. We are now moving to our last interviewee. Earlier this month, Jadalia, alongside anthropologists for the boycott of Israeli academic institutions, co-sponsored a panel discussion on BDS at the American Anthropological Association. Zoha Khalil, a senior staff attorney at Palestine Legal, was one of the participants in the panel. And I recently interviewed her, actually just yesterday. I interviewed Zoha, and we'd like to share with you the proceedings. Good afternoon, Zoha. Kifek, how are you?
Alhamdulillah, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. We are very happy to have you on to share with us your thoughts and reflections, and maybe a summary for those who weren't able to join the panel or watch it a couple of weeks ago. Can you tell us a little bit about that panel that you guys put together, and what was the message? And I might disappear from view.
Okay. So right now we are about halfway through the voting period for the American Anthropological Association's resolution on boycotting Israeli academic institutions. And the purpose of the panel was to talk about the reason for this resolution being put before the American Anthropological Association, the reason for the academic boycott in the first place, and to dispel some of the myths that have been raised around the legality of engaging in a boycott of Israel and what kind of impact that it could have on the organization. Or I've even heard from people being concerned about the impact on voting members. And from my perspective, what I was trying to do was to push back against this fear mongering. But I think the important place to start is to think about the reason why there is this academic boycott and the complicity of Israeli academic institutions in the oppression that the Israeli government is engaging in, and its continued harm that it is envisaging upon Palestinians, both in Palestine and those in the diaspora. And so it's really important for the American Anthropological Association to understand the role that it plays in, amplifying the harm that the Israeli academic institutions are participating in, and its own complicity, and taking steps to end that complicity, while also engaging in that action in a meaningful and mindful way that is pushing back against, the claims that are being made that this is infringing on academic freedom, but actually thinking about the ways in which a resolution like this could increase access to academic freedom, which is something that the Israeli government has been denying to Palestinian students and scholars. And so I really encourage people to watch the panel to really understand what is going on here, the role that anthropologists themselves have been playing in efforts to try to legitimize the Israeli government's actions, and the mythology that is being created by opponents of the boycott who don't even want to talk about what is going on in Israel and the role of anthropologists in that space, but they really just want to make people worry about facing material consequences for themselves or for the American Anthropological Association, when in reality, resolutions like this are vital to the ability of the association to continue functioning and to be able to attract the types of scholars that are focused on the future of anthropology and being able to conduct that in a manner that is in line with the mission of the association, and in line with our ethics as a society.
I think Nadia, you were muted, and that was my fault. So if there's a way we can quickly recap,
Yep.
this was
So
a human error, not a studio. It's transition error.
So we end our show as usual with a couple of must-read recommendations from our Newton series. There's a conversation with Cynthia G. Franklin about her new book, Narrating Humanity: Life Writing and Movement Politics from Palestine to Mauna Kea. And this book is a crucial comparative study that actually explores how life writing is mobilized to resist as well as perpetuate hegemonic forms of dehumanization that underwrite state violence. And the second must read is also from our Newton series, which is Melissa Gatter's book, Time and Power in Azraq Refugee Camp, in which she engages theories of time rather than just theories of space to offer an analysis of power in the Azraq camp. Make sure to check out both of these pieces on Jadaliya as well as everything else we published.
And you'll also be able to see all of this on the digest, which we will be publishing next week, early next week. I must say that it's a bittersweet moment to end the third season of Live with ASI. A lot of what we do here is a reflection of the weeks of work over, like, I guess, 4 weeks of work over the previous month. And even though we are not always trying to produce and overproduce and over disseminate the actual show, what we are doing is taking snippets of the show and disseminating them so that people can go back to the show or go back to the source to read or watch what they may have missed. So we thank you all for following. We thank you for being supportive throughout the past few years. And we also thank you for contributing, those of you who are making contributions to our efforts here at the Arab Studies Institute. This brings us to the end of the show, covering a month and a half in this time of knowledge production in some of May and June. And welcome to Nadia, who will be joining us as co-host going forward, along with MK and potentially Mu'in. Except that Mu'in is always with us because he's talking about his industrious connections podcast.
And we'll see you guys in a few months when we begin season 4 of Live with ASI.
Thanks,
Take care.
everyone. And
Thank you. Bye.
big shout out to our awesome producer, Abdullah Tafish, who is with us always in the background, and to Reina Nusam, who has prepared the graphics, to MK, who has always been in the background and will be joining us again in the future, and to all those who have participated and helped produce LWA. Thank you all so much. Goodbye.
Bye.